Yeah, but I think now time to dive right into it. Kerstin, Bartosz, I'll let them introduce themselves and hand over to you. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Mark. And hello, everyone. So yes, today we're going to talk about being a generic chart creator in the context of Visualize application that we have a pleasure of building for quite some time now. And my name, sorry, let me, change the slide. Okay, yeah. So my name is Bartosz Prusinowski. I'm an interaction engineer here at Interactive Things since more than 2 years now. And this is also more or less how long I've been involved in Visualize project. Prior to joining IXT, I was working in data science area, but at some point I realized that my passion for making charts is much bigger than my passion for making machine learning models, and that's why I decided to switch my career a bit, and here I am. And this is Kerstin.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Kerstin, Faye. I'm an interaction designer here at IXT, and I joined the team only in the beginning of the year. It was a great pleasure. And yeah, before that, I was actually also approaching the design field from many different angles. But what I was always interested most is that to look at the product from a user's lens, so put the user in the center of the design. And I feel like, especially in data visualization, that's extremely important because users come with very different skill sets and knowledge, and that has to be definitely foreseen. And yeah, we would also like to invite or greet the rest of our team that is working with us on the product, is and was, and that is not good. We would still like to have the projector to work. Well, let me just continue talking. So we have Anina, Patrick, we have Solange, unfortunately not joining the team. Michaela was quickly also working on the team. If I forgot someone, Mark, of course. Please remind me. So there's a lot of people as well in the room that worked on the product with us. And we'll also maybe answer some questions later. For our agenda today, we would like, first of all, to give you a bit of holistic understanding of the product and the tool and what it can do, and what the product actually is. Also, then after that, we would like to investigate the question of how we help the user making charts that make sense. And after that, we're diving a bit into our learning process and also the challenges that we were facing during the process, and give you a little bit of sneak peek on what we are working on and what is coming in the future for the tool. Let's get started. Visualize.admin.ch. Visualize is an open source tool for creating charts from linked data. And it enables the Swiss citizens and the government to create beautiful data visualizations. And by that, as you can tell, I'm talking about Swiss citizens. We have a very large user group and many different profiles. Naming some are for the chart creator side are like scientists, students, journalists, and federal agents. But yeah, with the chart creator, there comes, of course, in the product itself comes two user groups. One is the chart creators, and the other user group that we're talking about is the audience who is in the end looking at the charts, because all the charts are, of course, also published. So we have kind of two user groups from two different angles with two different profiles. We want to give you a little bit of insight as well on the tool and on the product from our perspective. So you don't see a product just falling from the sky. We worked like 10,000 hours on the product. We had like 5,000 commits on GitHub. And as I named already, we had a lot of people working on the tool out of different disciplines, like 11 people, designing, developing, planning, deciding, and so on. So yeah, it is a lot of workforce and a lot of brain power work that worked on the tool. At this point, you might ask yourself the question, why are we creating another chart creator? Because there is obviously a lot of fantastic tools how you can visualize data nowadays. well, there's different points to be mentioned here. Visualize aims to combine many different tools in one. Like normally in the process of data visualization, you need a tool to clean the data, and then you need a tool to create actually the visualization, and in the end you need a tool to publish the visualization. And yeah, with Visualize we try to bring all the tools together in one place. And also mentioning that the Swiss government actually has a mandate to make public data, like government data, publicly accessible. And yeah, the Bundesamt für Umwelt, the BAFU, is actually the owner of the tool, and made a giant step here with this tool to follow this mandate. And yeah, our principle in the tool is to help users to make charts that make sense. And since it's coming with a Swiss Confederation coat of arms, there has to be trust as well built in to trust the data, trust the tool as well. And yeah, in the following, I want to go a little bit deeper into that. How are we maintaining that trust? Yeah, so there's 3 main points that I want to mention here. The first one is it has to be user-friendly. So we are designing a simple and guided user interface and process that enforce data visualization's best practices to ensure that the resulting charts are effective and also consistent. And considering as well, like I mentioned before, different user groups and different angles, which lead us to scope as well and rethink certain features. The second point that I want to mention is it's open source. The tool is open to the public, so anyone interested in Swiss-related data can explore and visualize. And in general, like the Swiss government provides its data on an open way, and our tool makes it easy to create chart based on this open data. And one main difference that I want to point out at this point as well is that it's a bit different to tools like Tableau and Flourish, that we don't allow to upload custom data, and rather stick to the officially approved data, which is also kind of a trust point. Which leads to the last point, trustworthy. So as a part of the linked Swiss open data platform, Visualize enables everyone to create interactive data visualizations based on linked open data sources of the Swiss federal government, which can obviously be trusted. And what this linked data means, I'll hand over to Bartosz.
Thank you, Kerstin. Yes, so exactly at this point, it makes sense to explain a bit what this linked data is all about. And basically, it's a different paradigm of storing the data, compared to tabular data sources, where we store the data in a form of so-called triples, like subject, predicate, and object. Like in simple terms, it could be like Bartosz likes burgers, right? And that's how we kind of connect like the data within itself, which allows us to to kind of include also a lot of metadata inside the data, which is sometimes kind of difficult in tabular data sources, because here we can describe the data set, describe the dimensions that we use, describe the observations that we use, and we make kind of all of this metadata help us navigate data visualization landscape much more safely and enforce some good practices when it comes to making charts. So, like to make it maybe more visual, like if you work with data, you are pretty familiar with data sets that look like this, right? And if you were lucky, like you would have some like metadata, basically a description of this data set in the source where you found it, right? But even like though it might be not super clear, like at the first glance, for example, if the month is at the second place or the third place inside the date column, right? That's something that you usually need to figure out yourself. And it's also not super clear if the amount column, like what unit it has, is it like, I don't know, a monetary value, right? And the region, like we also don't know if it's canton or the city, in fact, right? So, if this data set was stored on linked data service that Swiss government provides, we would get some really useful metadata about the data set and the dimensions, right? So here, like we would kind of know that, for example, the format is like year, month, and then day. We would also get some values already pre-computed, like maximum available date or minimum. So we then also could avoid sending additional query and just get this information kind of for free. And another example of the amount column is that we would also know that it's in kilograms. It has scale type like ratio, which like tells us what operations can we do like with this measure. So for example, in this case, we know that we can use this in stacked bar chart, for example, because like, yeah, there is like through 0 on a scale, we allow multiplication, division. So like we also can control what happens in the tool based on the dimensions that we have. And we could also, for example, have a description of the column. So then we can use it in some places inside the tool, for example, on hover, to then also explain what the data is about. And the last thing that I wanted to mention when it comes to the data is that we like do not do any aggregations inside the tool. So we do not allow to like sum the data, make an average, right? Like if the data set was meant to be aggregated, it would already be pre-aggregated by the data publisher because they know how to deal with this data. They are the experts, right? And if such scenario is allowed, we would kind of get this also, like just in the data itself, right? But it might sound like inconvenience, but in fact, this allows our users to not think about cleaning the data, but just focus on visualizing it, which is the most fun part, right? So at this point, we wanted to show you the demo because we talked about the tool, but you didn't see the tool yet. So let me try to change the screen sharing. Okay, it looks to be working. So basically, when we enter the visualize.admin.ch website, we land on this homepage, right? And here, like the most interesting thing is to give you a sneak peek of what we're going to create during this demo. So this is a published chart, right? This is the chart that was created in the past. It shows traffic noise pollution segmented by grouped by day or night. We can also have some interactions, and maybe like the more interesting example is the area chart, where we also, for example, could narrow down like the X domain, right, and kind of focus on the subset of the dates that is interesting to us, and kind of change interactive filters to also focus on a given subset of the data. So let's dive into to actually making a chart, and like after entering this kind of create a visualization, like after clicking this button, basically, we land on the browsing page where we can search for a data set. We also have some categories, right, and organizations that publish the data set. So here I have one data set in mind, which is about the greenhouse gas emissions by sector and gas. So when we enter, like the data set preview page, like the most prominent thing that we see is, of course, this like table with preview of the observations, with basically 10 observations from a data set. But also what's important and interesting, I hope, is that on the left side, we have this metadata that I talked about, right? We have a lot of ways to extract additional information about the data set. So here we know who published the data set, we know when it was created. We also have some contact points. If we have some questions about the data set, we can reach out to the people who are responsible for it. We can also learn more about the data set. We also allow like data publishers to kind of like have those links, and then they can be, some information, maybe how the data was collected, right? And that's kind of up to the data publisher. But we also have this. What's also kind of maybe different from other tools, and which builds like the trustworthiness that we talked about, is that we also can access the queries that we use to fetch the data inside our tool. And as the data is hosted on this Link Data Service, Lindas, we also expose those queries. So if you would like to learn SparkQL, or just kind of, so that's basically the language to extract the data. And you also have, a way to just, in this editor, it's not the part of our tool, right? But just to kind of show you, like we can type, we can then extend this query, and we also, like by this, know what's happening inside the data if you are really interested in that. And the last thing on this preview page, which that I wanted to show you, which is also not always kind of taken for granted, is that we can, that the data basically is translated at source, right? So we can switch the language. We have like those 4 languages available: German, French, Italian, and English. And most of the data sets like follow those best practices of being translated, and we can also like effortlessly switch between the languages and create the charts in those 4 languages basically. So let's now dive into like the chart editor that is the main part of the tool, in fact. And here, you know, what we see at the first glance, which is like most prominent, is the chart itself, right? It's a bar chart which shows emissions in CO2 equivalents in megatons for all greenhouse gases in Switzerland, which came from the land use. So we will make it more interesting soon, but now we can focus on the left side of the tool, which kind of like where the options to modify the chart reside. So we can change the chart type, right? We can kind of like modify the options related to vertical axis, horizontal axis. We can also add segmentation, which would change the chart type to grouped bar chart or stacked bar chart. But here I wanted to focus on one feature that we like didn't yet mention, but we can also like make use of hierarchical data, basically. So, you know, for some of the dimensions that we have, there is also an option like for data providers to express the data sets, I mean, in fact, variables as hierarchies. And then we can also see, you know, in fact, here, the thing that I talked about with data aggregation. So here, like we can see that this data was in fact pre-aggregated, as we can select, you know, like all gas emissions, right, or focus on some subset of it. And we do not do any kind of aggregation ourselves. Ourselves is just comes from the data directly. And now we switch to all gas emissions, right? And for the other filter value, it's also kind of the hierarchy. We are focusing on everything, right? So the first thing now that we can get from the chart is that the emissions appear to be dropping, right? Like in the last 30 years, they went down from 55 megatons to 35. So that's quite nice. But it's hard to tell at this point, you know, which type of gas, you know, makes kind of up for the total that we see. So we can enable segmentation and select greenhouse gas. And now basically like it's pretty, you know, clear already who is the winner, let's say in the emissions, right? And it's carbon dioxide, right? And to make it, again, maybe more kind of graspable, like we can also enable abbreviations. And then if you are like more chemically oriented, you can also see, you know, kind of like the symbols for those chemical compounds, I would say. And that's also part of the metadata. So here you see that on the level of kind of observation, we also can attach some additional data that we can then make use of in our tool. So, you know, like going through the other options, like we can stack or of course group, right, the chart. And now let's skip some options for now. And again, kind of like I wanted to highlight here that we try to make it as kind of smart as possible, right? So we also, in the case of encountering theoretical dimension, we do not by default select like the totals, right? We just focus on kind of the things that make up for the total, which, yeah, in this case are like just the specific gases themselves. So, you know, like it's quite nice, I would say, but it's hard to tell. That's the general issue with stack bar charts. You know, if the top part, if methane, in fact, like drops over the years or not, right? So to kind of answer this question, we can enable, basically we can make the filters interactive. So right now, when we enable this option, like we have a way to just unselect the values, right? And then kind of like focus on just one particular subset of the data set. And here we also see that, yeah, in fact, it went down from 6.5 megatons to 5.1. And then let's say that you have use case to compare this this subset, this particular gas with other one, with nitrous oxide. And here, like, you know, again, it's kind of like, I hope it's visible that the orange one, the one that we had also drops from 4 to 2.8. But it's hard to tell like which gas drops faster when it comes to like relative values, right? Like in percentage terms. So we also have like a feature to kind of like enable, you know, answering those questions where we can like normalize this case. And then we can also answer this question because we know that in 1990, like methane made up 62% of emissions compared like to the other gas that we selected. And in the last year where we have the data, it was 64%. So like the speed was kind of decreasing, the emissions was faster for for nitrous oxide, right? So now that we went through some of the interactivity options, right? Let's also, because right now it's just enabled by the editor, we can also expose this kind of feature to the end user where the chart is actually published. And then, as you can see, this option appeared here. So let's make it by default to show the normal chart. And now we can publish the visualization, which means that we will get a unique link for the visualization. And then we can share or embed the chart in other websites. And as you can see, all of the interactions that we've seen in the editor mode are also visible in this publish mode. And so what's I just realized that I forgot to add the title to the chart, right? The chart should have a title. So let's copy and edit the visualization. And let's add some titles. So it will be English chart, and this will be German chart. And then when we publish the chart again, so as I've already shown you that we have this data translated at source, right? It's also true, as you've already seen in the interface, that we can also create the titles and the description in a given language that we want to. And then when we embed this chart, we can also kind of control which version we show, if it's this language or this language. So I think that's it when it comes to the demo. So maybe you have some questions already to the tool. If so, please let me know.
One thing I was thought is kind of edit it once you get published.
Exactly. So that's something that we work on. We will talk about this in the outcomes, because we are thinking about the logging feature where we would then enable this feature. In fact, we have some prototypes already, but for now, in the kind of production version, that's not yet possible.
We will come back to that question.
Exactly. Yes. Yes.
So maybe we can switch back to that.
So let's switch back. So let me change the screen to. Okay.
So now that you got a bit more an overview what the tool can do, we would like to dive into the question of how we are trying to help the user to make charts that make sense. And yeah, if I would answer that in actually one sentence, I would say to provide context. Like all the synergies enabled by the linked data allow us to guide the user, both actually the creator of the chart and also the audience, as you could have seen, to understand as well the data and to create meaningful charts. And what that means, we want to show in a few examples. First is smart disabling, or also how to help the user not to do a mistake. This first feature is about using metadata to dynamically disable mutually exclusive chart configuration options. What does that mean? An example to that is, so what you're seeing here is a bar chart, a stacked bar chart. And when we switch to the grouped mode, we are disallowing the option to normalize it or to give 100%, because in this mode, it wouldn't make sense to give this option. And also, meanwhile, we are always including hints and little warnings that the user learns why something is not working anymore. So there's also a learning process for the user. Another example of disabling is a timeline animation that is disabled when we are putting the horizontal axis in a time dimension. So we are using this dimension for the horizontal axis, and therefore we cannot use it in a timeline animation anymore. And also, again, we're giving the user an explanation why this was disabled and why that doesn't make sense in this moment. As well as a bit more broader example. Generally, we're allowing chart types only that are possible for this data set. And also when you choose your data set before you're arriving on the editing mode, it only gives you the chart types that actually make sense for that data set. And yeah, and also, I think also when you're editing certain chart types might be disabled at this point because of the settings. Yeah, which as well connects me to the next point. how we help the user. It's the safe chart type switch. Yeah, we want to prevent situations where you spend like 10 minutes setting up configurations for a bar chart to only realize later that actually a line chart would be better to show this data set. And then you change the chart type and then everything is lost, all the configurations that you've done. Yeah, so to prevent this, we implemented a mechanism to keep as much chart configurations as possible when you switch to another chart type. During the chart creation process. As you can see here, the normalization that was set is kept, and also the sorting option to name is also set when we were switching to the area chart.
Okay, so the next thing that we also do to help make charts make sense is that we disallow no data. And this might be a bit technical, but as we can't really aggregate the data, like we need to make sure that we always filter by key dimensions. So like in fact that we make sure that there is only one value per given year, for example, when you think about line charts, right? Because like otherwise, I mean, if we had like those duplicates, that would not really work, right? So in order to make sure that those filters are kind of like always selected and to avoid the situation that we show like no data message, we implemented something called cascading filters, where we kind of like go from the top filter to the bottom filter to make sure that that basically we do not end up in this situation. So as you see here, it's a data set about buffing water quality, and it contains measurements for like different buffing water quality stations. And like there is like, let's say, a small chance that like two different stations were measured during the same day. So I hope that it was visible that the date was kind of reloaded also together with monitoring program that's changed, and it's already like in fact tied with the first value in the filter. So yeah, so that's one of the additional things that we make to assure. The other very important thing is like, I think that it's a keyword of today's presentation. It's about metadata, but in fact, it's not about the metadata kind of in a way that, we use it to disable some options or to kind of, yeah, like control how we display the things, but it's in fact about metadata that the end user sees, right? So we wanted to make sure that this context about what the data is about is available both to the editor who makes the chart and then to the end user, right? So we also see that we have this metadata panel that we can enable from the published visualization. And then we have like the information about the data set. We also have information about the variables that we use inside the data set along with descriptions. And then we can dive inside a given variable to then see even particular values that, yeah, like maybe extent, of the numerical value or the cantons that are available along with the abbreviations. So that was also very important to us to keep this metadata to both also help make better charts, right? Because when you know your data, you can better you can make better chart. And then when you are consuming this visualization, it's also important to keep this context in mind. And I think the last thing that we wanted to show you is about animations. And like generally, this is like a super nice tool to show changes like across time, right? Of some measure of some variable. And basically, like usually you kind of expect nice animations, right? And it's like kind of challenging to achieve in such generic tool. So like that looks quite okay. I would say like the domain is not jumping, right? It's kind of also easy to follow how the circles are moving. But then let's consider another example of the bar chart. And now, as you can see, like between the first year, right, like 2014, and the next one, like there were some like missing data points, which made the bars like enter inside like the next year, right? And this, it's kind of like one of the issues of this visualization, and the other one, which is not an issue on its own, but here, as we have those entering bars and then also the domain, the y-axis domain changes, right? Everything is dynamic. It's kind of like hard to keep track of what's going on in the visualization. So in order to make, those cases also like maybe better animatable and understandable for the end users, we like in this case, implemented an option to kind of like keep the context also, you know, not in the case of like the dataset description, but in this case, in case of like this temporal dimension, right? So as you can see, like we keep the space for all of the bars, even if they do not appear in a particular year. So then there's like not a lot of jumping, right? And we also keep the Y scale fixed. So then it's also maybe easier to see the evolution of the values, right? And the last thing, not particularly related to, you know, providing the context or about metadata, but it's about reusing synergies across the tool. So, you know, like if like we wanted to make a simple bar chart with our tool, like what you would need to do is to enable sorting of the x-axis by the value, right? And then enable the animation. And as you can see, like we have this basic version of bar chart trace, which I think is also a nice example of the need to like constantly think about the synergies across the tool and yeah, make use of everything that we have, because sometimes we can have like really nice combinations, and instead of maybe here adding a dedicated bar chart trace, right, chart type, we can reuse those synergies to make use of those combinations. Yes. Now,
Yes. That leads us already to some learning and also challenges that we were facing during the process to help the user. So the first thing I would like to mention is that yeah, there's to do a chart creator, we give the chart creator also a lot of responsibility to make charts that make sense and are understood and not wrong or false equivalences. So there's always a constant balance of how much responsibility does the chart creator have in this point, and how much do we have to use we have to guide the user to do the chart. Which leads to the next point of the constant evaluation of how many features are we giving the user, and also how much freedom and flexibility the user has within a feature. Versus not giving a feature and therefore also not making it too complex and therefore also user unfriendly to use the tool. Because I mean, to keep in mind, we're not wanting to build another Tableau. We're trying to really help the user here for a clear process, and we could add a lot of features, but then we always think about how much does this benefit the user. And that's a point that I mentioned before already, that's a bit challenging as well when it comes to user-centered design, that we have two users to keep in mind. We have the chart creator who has to use the tool, and then we have the end audience also being able, through the interactive features that we implemented, to interact with the tool and to understand the chart itself. And these two user profiles come sometimes with a very different mindset or very different skill set as well, and understanding and knowledge. So doing user-centered design has to be done kind of in two layers. First, to think about the chart creator, but then also to think about the audience in the end.
Yes, and now let's focus on more development, maybe related learnings. So, you know, like it's, we learned that it's hard to foresee all of the connections when conceptualizing a new feature. And, you know, like one of the examples that I've already talked about was of this connection between sorting the x-axis and the animation, that we can in fact maybe create, you know, additional chart type, right? So like we learned that what really helps in realizing all of those potentially hidden connections is to make proof of concepts. So basically the initial implementations of the feature when the design is also not 100% finalized. So we can then test out some, you know, some features with real data. And as we have like a lot of different data sets with different edge cases, we can really then learn, you know, how our feature would behave in this case or in this case. So like what we do a lot is we do a lot of this kind of proof of concepts that then influence the design decisions. So we have a process that we call internally like ping pong. So we have a lot of ping pong between design and development to build the best feature possible. So the next thing connected to it is that it's hard to find the balance between making things generic from the start and shipping faster. So no, it's also related to our general approach that we have in building a tool. So we learned that starting out not super generic and tweaking the code as needed is a good compromise. So it's related to the point above, right, with the proof of concepts. So we usually start with kind of this initial version that we then tweak as we go along the way to kind of bring the feature to the end. And the last learning that I wanted to talk about, that it's easy to break things when you add a new feature. You can only imagine that with this system of interconnected vessels, even small change in one place could result in some unexpected consequences in other places of the application. So we learned that it's very important to put emphasis on testing, in particular E2E testing, screenshot testing, also a lot of manual testing, but also in relation to that, to consolidate the code related to one behavior in one place, to collocate the code, and also to do internal documentation to kind of document the decisions, the process, the goals that we want to achieve, and why certain decisions were made help prevent this. So that's also very important when making such tools.
Now a little bit of sneak peek, bit of a more exciting topic, the outlook. So yeah, what we are currently working on, it's a very big feature, dashboards. Yeah, so with this feature, obviously the user can not only place one chart, but several charts, which makes it possible to compare charts and also build stories around it, and to show multiple charts in the same place, and also enable things like shared filters across the dashboard. So that's quite exciting. And what comes with it, of course, when you're creating a bit more complex system of several charts, is a login. So a personal user account where you can then save the drafts of the charts that you did or the dashboards that you did. Because it can be a bit frustrating if you cannot go back or update certain things. And this is a feature that was kind of pressing now to come. And the last thing that I want to mention is the merging of cubes. And this is about merging observations from several data sets on a common temporal dimension together, so we can show such data sets in the same chart. And the example that you see here is you kind of have a data set 1 with a dimension 1, and you have a data set 2 with a dimension 2, and then you kind of show these dimensions, but then it would also have on the horizontal axis a shared dimension, which is the time. So we kind of map the two data sets together. Yes, so these were the two little sneak peeks, and we are already in a time for questions. Maybe you want to mention as well the...
Yes, exactly. So, also as mentioned, the tool is open source, right? So you can take a look at the code, right? If you're interested in diving into this, you can also propose features and record bugs if you find ones. And then the link is, of course, visualizeadmin.ch. So so the tool is open for you to try out and also to gather some feedback. So.
Shall we start with the room of questions? Because I see some questions in the chat already. How did you choose the chart types? Are all chart types available for all data sets? And do you select them based on the types? This is what I mentioned before, we are suggesting, after the user decided for a data set, we are suggesting a chart type that fits best on the data set. Other data sets that would be possible as well are available, but certain data sets that don't make sense, we disable to help the user. And we started with this set of data, with this set of chart types, but of course we're keeping in mind it's not the end of the tool, so we are also well thinking about which chart types we could add in the future. But as well, this goes back to kind of give the user a little bit of range of what should be possible, because they're not designers often, or sometimes not even like data scientists or something, but so it's good to have kind of a bit of a range to start with.
I think I can take the next one. The next question is about smart chart type selection and how is that implemented in the data model. So, like basically here, like when we fetch the data, we get like again this metadata about the dimensions that are included in a data set. So, for example, we upfront know if it uses temporal dimensions, nominal dimensions, geographical dimensions, or some other types of dimensions, and then based on this, we basically check, for example, we have some chart types that are temporal dimension enabled, right? So then if we detect this dimension, we then enable like line chart, assuming that there is at least one measure in a chart, right? And then like for some other chart types, if we have a map, right, it's like clear that we need to have like geographical dimensions. So we basically kind of just base this decision on the metadata on the variable level.
And the next question as well is going into your question again, if once a chart is published, can be re-edited, and we are working on that as well with the ability to have a login and as well to save drafts as well, like this whole process of being able to then, once a chart is published, to re-edit it again. Which is, of course, has its constraints and has its difficulties, since the chart is published, the public audience has seen a chart, and then it's changed, it's embedded in some, I don't know, article or something like this, it might change a little bit. So there's always kind of the two user lens that I was talking about to consider as well. Yeah, I think that's it from the chat. Yeah, this is the one that I just answered.
Yeah, I think maybe so like we have I think two more. So I think I take the last one. Does the Swiss government collect any qualitative data that will eventually be a part of this project? So I mean, like the kind of data that we use is not explicitly tied to the project. Like there is already a lot of data sets present on Open Data Swiss platform, which like a lot of, or maybe even all, I'm not sure, governmental offices publish their data in this public format. And we are in a kind of, not we, but data publishers are in a graduate process of like migrating this data to a format that, linked data format basically that we support in Visualize. So, I mean, I'm not sure if there is like any data that will be collected specifically for the tool, but we like welcome new data sets on a regular basis. So right now, I think we have like 60 or 70 data sets, which are like approved for production. And like this process is still ongoing. So like we hope to see more in the future. Yeah.
Then I will take on the next question. Where did you set the limit to complexity to prevent feature creep, or how did you approach this topic? We are constantly thinking about this and evaluating, and it's very based on the feature itself, the decision if we implement a feature or not, and also how much flexibility we give. One example that I can name is about color settings in the chart, that the user might have the option to change the color, but then we also have to think about the end user and the accessibility of the chart. So how many options do we give here to change colors, and where do we limit and set like predefined color palettes that the user can choose of and that are kind of follow certain accessibility standards. So yeah, to answer your question, it really depends a bit on the feature, and every feature has to be kind of evaluated on that. There's another one. Did you conduct any user experience studies in the process of creating this? Since I was not part of the design team from the beginning on, I don't know about the beginning of the tool. I will bit more focus on that with Anina, but I can answer the question of now that we are implementing a very big new feature, the dashboards, we are definitely want to go a little bit more into user testing again to see what makes sense, and also kind of to sense a bit the level of where we are standing with the users. But
yeah, also in the past, if certain testing evaluate that we added at the very beginning, where even another designer was part of the project, and I also that we're on track and not only look at things from the creative perspective, but also
Any questions from the room?
curious to know, because I think it's difficult to find the balance between other features and I was wondering if you have considered to add the most concept of physical options that are more core options than
Different complete modes we haven't considered, but maybe it's pointing a little bit towards the example that you showed before, that we are kind of selecting certain things to help the user a little bit what to start off with, and rather than unselecting these options and select something else. So we kind of try to integrate it into the flow to point the users of certain more default settings, but to have a complete different mode, we didn't think about it yet.
I think that one maybe thing that could like go into this direction. I'm not sure if like super precisely, but is that we can like collapse the sections, right? So we can like kind of also have our focus, for example, just on this particular thing that we are editing. We also have a way of like everything can be collapsed, so you can just focus, like not that.
Try to make an example here.
We have like, I don't know, 20 options available, right? Every section is kind of collapsible. So then I think like it's easier to keep your focus on a specific part. But yeah, I think we didn't really consider this yet. Yeah.
Didn't see the need yet.
Since you're using a lot of metadata for guiding the user, do you have like a wish list of what you wished for was available in metadata that is not? Typically kind of like work with metadata on, kind of poor environments where, so is there things that you think would help the user much more if it was available?
Okay, I think from, just from the technical side, I mean, I'm personally quite happy with the amount of metadata that we have. And also it made me realize, that, yeah, in fact, like how much influence can this metadata have on a chart? Because like previously, when not really being into this linked data world, I mean, you usually just had data set, right? And then you had some kind of like values inside a given column. And then, I mean, it wasn't so present, at least in my mind, to think about this in the types of like what scale type does it have? Like, is it like ordinal, nominal? I mean, it also opened kind of like my eyes that we can really tie this information to a specific place inside the application to also guide the user. So, I mean, I'm not sure if I have a specific example of a particular thing. Maybe Kerstin has some also view on that. What's also a nice idea I can just add is maybe not super like metadata, but having those pre-aggregated things. As I mentioned that, for example, you have like for a data variable, you do not need to find mean and max value, right? Or for some other numerical dimension, you kind of have this information up front. So you also can then influence the filters and kind of make the application more performant by kind of doing those things in like data pre-processing mode. So that was also quite insightful. Yeah.
Who's maintaining this metadata? Because you just mentioned that it's essential that this is, let's say, reliable. So who is doing this? If people don't do it at that quality, or put in some, let's say, not very qualified aggregations, although they're paid for doing a better job. Always happens because you have a lot of data sources.
Yes. So I mean, so it's connected with the thing that we like do not allow, right? Like kind of end users, let's say, to upload their data, right? It kind of also go through the governmental bodies, right? So it's like, let's say, this office of the government that integrates the data, right, in collaboration with our third-party partners who maintain the tool to kind of like load this data inside Linda's linked data service. So it's yeah, as I mentioned, it gives you the end user a lot less things to worry about, right? Because like they need to do it, and I assume that it's quite time-consuming process. But basically, it like lies on data publishers. So we are making use of their work through our tool.
You don't have any plausi checks
I
implemented on the journey?
Yeah, so like we are kind of in close collaboration with external partner who provides the backend for our service, right? Kind of and maintains all of it, and then like those checks there are like pipelines and stuff that make sure of that things work. But we also on our side, of course, have some checks, right? That for example, if we detect that we have like two data sets of the same ID, then we like explain to the user that like we kind of also have those checks, but not necessarily on the data level, but rather on the correctness of the metadata, right? So if there are no dimensions linked to a data set, we can make a chart, right? And we then make those errors also available to the user.
One thing that makes it also a bit easier to keep the metadata up to date is that for some dimension, particularly the geographical dimensions, and particularly the cities and municipalities, they use shared dimensions that are shared across the dataset. For example, the Zurich here will not be repeated into another dataset. So if we would change the metadata on Zurich, we would not need to change it across the dataset. So it would make the process of keeping metadata up to date easier because you would not have to repeat the same operation.
What happened? One theory.
The geographical shape. Yeah. There is which particular boundary is tied to Zurich at one particular time. But right now we take the latest, and in the future it could be something, particularly for datasets that would need to have some historicity to it. We will need to implement it, but at the data level, it's built in that we know about it.
Know which state.
Yes.
So
Actually, remote people, can you hear us? Can you give us a sign if you can hear the questions from the audience? Because I'm not so sure about that. Yeah. Okay. Perfect. Yeah. Good.
So I think I understand that the Bartosz is the product owner of this.
Yes.
So is it mostly a Bartosz thing, or has it been adopted by other federal agencies?
Yes, so when it comes to like the data sets, I'm not sure about the proportions. It's like 60% up. I think that it's like kind of it's becoming more distributed, that we have data sets from like many different agencies. So it's also that governmental agencies kind of collaborate together on defining the scope of the tool, the kind of like next feature that they would like to see, and then they try to guide us. So it's kind of like a collaborative effort led by Bartosz.
But it's meant to expand.
It's meant to expand, and we have
expanding.
we have
Yeah,
datasets
it's
from the
expanding.
BFA into the BRA.
Very, very good to hear.
Some of the, for example, prices of electricity coming from BFA are available as data, and dataset on prices on agricultural products from BFA are also being put right now. So it's spreading.
Yes, we have another example from the audience, from the remote audience. If you were to develop a tool like this again, what would you do again in exactly the same way? What would you do differently? So, yeah, that's a good and tough question.
A long question.
I mean, I would say it's hard to really tell, because when you first start building such tool, you can't really see the end of it, right? So you do not really know like how big it will grow, what feature will it have, and then it also makes it more difficult to kind of like I know, maintain the structure, right? If you have like one branch of the features that is going to expand a lot, and then the other which can be forgotten at some point. So I mean, from my side, I'm not super sure if there is like a clear insight of what would be done differently from the development side, at least. Maybe Patrick, you have something.
Maybe from the design side.
Yeah.
From the design perspective, I would say I'm not so long on the tool yet, but it's for this long process very important to shape and maybe reshape a vision for the product again and again and again, like to kind of having a guidance when it comes to what we were talking about already, which features should be implemented, which not, to kind of have a big direction of where we want to go, which maybe that could be sometimes when you work long on a product that you lose this vision sometimes, so you kind of have to bring people together to reshape it again, which we are again working on. But yeah.
Yeah, I think just to add on here, I think that's where the user testing is why it is really very important. I mean, for example, at the very beginning, the UI looked quite different. And after we did some user testings last year, we noticed that there were just some issues in the user experience, because we had kind of like a left sidebar and a right sidebar, and it was a bit annoying to constantly go back and forth. And so based on that feedback, then we completely reworked the UI, and obviously are continuing to completely improve that. So I think because as this project has been going on for like 4 years already, it's important that these products are evolving. And so it's also important that you evolve with it and constantly re-evaluate, as Kerstin said, are we still on the right track? And also trends change, technology changes, so that you also adapt to that and to obviously user behavior.
Yeah, user behavior and the user group also with the tool grew as well. So yeah.
At a technical level, I would say more test, more mock data. It's very technical.
One question regarding, I mean, your idea is to let people publish themselves cards and then use it on their own website. Is there an idea to let them change the style of cards? Because typically that's what I would like to do, right? Don't want to use the admin.ch fonts.
In a certain extent, yes. When I was talking before about this color example, what we can do at the moment is to choose your own color palette, for example, which again comes with the risk that colors are chosen that are not accessible. So it's always a little bit of back and forth of how much flexibility you want to give the user. And I think having this kind of governmental bit of hearing as well is not so bad, because if end users see where it comes from, there might also come a trust with the chart and with the data. So it's a bit, but I see the point. Yeah.
I guess in this case, also you need balance to the level of customizability. That's as you come from NZZ, maybe you want to have a style that's from for the newspaper and set, and maybe there could be a predefined set of styles that would make it easier, at least that you don't give the full power of full CSS for the chart, or full change all your colors, but maybe a set of predefined things or predefined actors that could have those features to be discussed.
That's coming with a
Yeah,
yeah.
this is what we are also
Sneak
like
peek again.
discussing, right? When it comes to login and like organizations that would be
Mhm.
created inside this login with some like predefined styles for students.
Yeah.
So that's still kind of like
Yeah.
the process of conceptualizing that.
To
That
make
would
kind of
be-
an organization login access. You kind of can also maybe upload your certain palettes or these kind of things.
But in any case, you have to disallow manipulating this in an irregular way. Because if you put yes to red and no to green, and you don't mention this legend, or let's say with a very one point font below, this is let's say big, really enormous potential of manipulation and creating fake data.
Absolutely no, and this is also what I was mentioning before, the challenge of how much freedom do we give the user and how much responsibility do we give the chart creator here. Like there's a lot of, especially when we're talking about merging of cubes or also dashboards where we can set charts next to each other, we kind of have to as well trust a little bit the mind of the chart creator to do certain things that make sense, because if we are disallowing everything, then it's a bit of always a back and forth. Is that a new question or answer? No, that's an answer. Okay.
Do you have a process to detect charts that are not used anymore? I imagine there are a lot of charts created. It's ever growing.
We have access to database, so I mean, like we definitely kind of like can see what charts have been made, right? But when it comes to the number of like how much times was the chart used, I mean, we also kind of keep the monitoring of all of the requests made to our page via some logging tools like Sentry. So I guess we could get those statistics, but right now we are not in a phase that we, for example, have a problem with like too much data set or database usage. So right now we do not have such mechanism, but of course that may be useful in the future, right? But for now, like the answer is no.
A very low level, which would be, I think it's, you made this amazing work of trying to harmonize data that doesn't look the same when you look at it year by year. But then how do you let the user know where the missing data is and where there is data equal to 0? In this example, quite obvious, maybe in a scatter plot it was not existing, and maybe a note somewhere. But how do you deal with non-statisticians who don't necessarily know what missing data means, or expected or not expected? How would you make it clear that?
Yes, that's a good question, and I think I'm not super sure at this point. That need to be checked, but I think we treat those observations differently when interacting with it. So when we hover over the bar, I believe we do not show 0, but just show like a dash or an 8. I'm pretty sure that that's the way we do it right now. But this would be correct. But when it comes to like other chart types, I mean, like for example, in the map, right, you kind of like have this information by like gray area, for example. But when it comes to like specifically scatter plots, I'm not 100% sure if we have some like measures to address this problem implemented. So that's
That's true. Go to the lab. It's a good topic. Yeah. Any other questions? Then thank you so much at this point. The links you can ask us personally again.
Thanks again, Kerstin and Bartosz, for the great presentation. Yeah, in closing, I'd just like to reiterate what I mentioned before. Slight preview on the event coming up on the 24th of January with the visuals team, which we're very excited about. I think we'll have 2 data journalists and a software engineer here come talk about their projects and the method and process.
It's actually me, though.
Oh.
The software engineer.
Cool. Yeah, super excited about that. Yeah,